Hey everyone, Lee Troop, coach of Team Boulder and coach of this guy beside me, Jake Riley. Last time we did a catch up, it was actually after the marathon in Sapporo last year in Japan. And we haven't done a catch up since because it's been a really rough year, to say the least. So what we're doing today is to give everyone an overview of where Jake is and what we've been dealing with, and be really honest and open and transparent, because that's what we are. And hopefully with today we might be able to have someone that's maybe going through a similar situation of what Jake's gone through, be able to then identify that and then reach out to the people that are needed to help get them back on track. So we've got a fair bit to open up, but 2 weeks ago Jake put a post up about an eating disorder that he's been struggling with. It's called RED-S, and I'll let you explain a little bit about what that diagnosis is.
Oh yeah, I like I said in the post, I going into the Olympic trials, I did some calorie restricting. So I basically was trying to get down to what I thought would be a good goal weight. So I just kind of picked a number I thought like about 5 pounds lighter than what I normally compete at, and so to reach that number, I just like took a certain number of calories off of my normal diet, and then I was obviously very successful at the trials, and so going to the Olympics, I figured like that's the way going forward, and so I did a similar thing, but I think between just like the cumulative effect of it, like the first time it can sometimes work, and then it gives you diminishing returns and then starts turning negative the more you do it. Plus I was probably training a little bit harder with the added stress of trying to acclimate to the heat. It just put me in this real deep hole. So coming out of the Olympics, I just couldn't hit workouts. I just felt cranky all the time, like was having trouble sleeping. It just felt like all of my talent had just been sucked out. So even though I had stopped, I was only doing it for like a 6-week period or something like that, even though I went back to my normal eating habits, it wasn't enough to take me out of the hole. I just, I wasn't eating enough calories to fuel the training that I was doing, and it just put my body into this like protective state where it was like, we can't give you any more energy. We're just gonna hold all this energy in reserve, and so just had nothing to be able to compete with. And it took us a long time to figure it out, because I didn't change my diet that drastically, really. It was mostly just cutting out like sodas and desserts and stuff, and even
Carbohydrates? Were you cutting carbohydrates and maximizing more proteins?
No. Which is actually the other thing, is that it turned out, from talking with nutritionists now, Maddie Alm, I was probably never eating enough carbohydrates. It's just that like with the extra calories I was doing just enough. But like looking back on my career, I've had periods of like dips in performance, especially at heavy marathon training, and I was probably in a similar caloric deficit then and just didn't know it, because I have felt similar feelings in the past, and I think that was one of the reasons that it took so long for us to figure it out, was because you kind of expect to be fatigued during marathon training. You expect to like kind of have that tiredness, and you also expect there to be like dips and valleys, but eventually it just got to the point where it was extreme. Like the breakdown on the long run 6 weeks out from Boston was probably the biggest wake-up call. But
so when we were at Sapporo, that was the first you had told me about modifying your diet, and I was unaware of that. And we looked at all the things that we had done, from training and gym and everything like that, which we had everything dialed in. You said that you trialed this for the first time at the Olympic trials and it worked. Had you not done anything similar to this when you were in college, coming out of college, when you were with the Hansons? And then if you hadn't, because I can see you shaking your head, what then was the mindset for you then to experiment with something like this?
I hadn't done it before. So I've always been a little bit heavier than my competitors, 10, 15, 20 pounds heavier than most of the people that I'm competing against. And I mean, this is like relatively common, I would say. Like I feel like from talking with other runners, or at least seeing what they put out, but also just being around them, like you see people be very particular about what it is they're eating, and like you hear lots of comments of like, it's got to earn blank dessert or whatever it is, and like, you know, if I order a big breakfast and I'm out with other runners, like I'll sometimes get side eyes or like, whoa, you're really going for it. And so I had the perception that whatever I was doing was not what a typical runner would do, and furthermore, by not modifying my diet, I was essentially like leaving potential on the table. That like in order to compete with other people, I had to be doing what other people was doing, and I thought like shooting for picking a race weight and trying to reach that race weight by competition, that's what other runners are doing, so I should be doing that. So I guess I thought I was going par for the course, and like the way that I really justified it was like, I'm not going extreme here, like I'm not skipping meals, I'm not going to bed hungry, I'm not I don't think anybody would have, I mean, no one picked up on it, because I think most of the meals that I was eating looked like normal meals. It was just less than what I had been doing before.
And it's not like other athletes haven't done this. I mean, I know Steve Monteghetti used to do this carbo depletion. Steve Monteghetti, 4-time Olympic marathon runner for Australia, 208 guy. At the start of his career, he was doing what was known as carbo depletion, where you'd spend 10 days not eating any carbohydrates at all, like really depleting your body. And then 72 hours before, you would then eat as many carbohydrates as you could. And he had some success with that. He had a great Berlin marathon where he ran his 208, but then when he went to the Olympics in 92, it backfired on him, because all of a sudden he went from a cool, moderate temperature marathon that he was preparing for into really oppressive heat in Barcelona. And so not only could he get the carbohydrates in, his body was missing hydration and all the things that would have helped him balance out. And from that point, he never did it again. So it's not like you are the first person to experiment with doing something with your diet. There's been plenty of people that have done it. Some of the things you talked about post-Olympics, you couldn't get yourself back up, you didn't have the energy, training wasn't going well, you were cranky and irritable, and we would see that at training, and particularly with some of your teammates. Where did you get to a point where you then had to start looking into why you were starting to dive in not only performance, because the races weren't great, but then also in training?
So we went and did Gate River Run, and I think I finished like in the 30s or something like that, maybe high 20s. You know, just got my ass absolutely handed to me, and I felt like bad doing it. Like I didn't go out with the leaders and then die. I was never with any pack, and then I fell off of that, and so that was really frustrating. At the same time, I'd been dealing with some like peroneal stuff and some hamstring stuff, and I thought I'd kind of fixed that. And then I came back from like a 2-week trip to the East Coast, which was Gate River, and then I went to Boston to do a course tour, and came back and I was like, okay, well maybe we're through this, because the long run in Boston went okay, and then we went out for the long run up by the res, and my Achilles hurt like, from the start. I felt just absolutely gutted from the beginning of what was supposed to be a 2.5-hour run, and it was cold and windy, and I just like, it just all kind of piled on top of me, and I basically had like a little mini breakdown on that run. We had to kind of take a second and talk some things out, and then that was part of it. And then also the other part of it was I read a Runner's World article on Jared Ward, and
You thought it might have been thyroid?
I thought it might have been thyroid, because everything that they were saying in that article was like, oh yeah, I have that, and I have that. Like it all just sounded like eerily familiar. So I was like, yeah, this isn't normal running fatigue, because like at this point in our training cycle, I should be coming around and I should be able to start hitting workouts, and I still wasn't. So maybe there's some other source for this. So then we went in to get more blood work done. Then we thought, well, maybe it's thyroid, maybe it's iron, maybe it's one of those other metrics. So my iron was low, but I had been taking iron supplements because I'd gotten a low iron result back in September the previous year, but I wasn't responding to it. And so Dr. Cabalius told me to go seek out a nutritionist, see if like maybe there's something we can change in the diet where like there's a reason I'm not absorbing it or something. So I went and talked to Maddie Alm, and within 10 minutes, it was like, yeah, you probably have red S.
And like going back through that, I get asked the question as a coach, what did I do? And I have a great team of people that I lean on and work with. And, Dr. Efren Kabalis is our sports doctor, and Matt Ferguson works with Jake as our PT. And there were a number of things we looked at, and I originally thought that potentially it was the post-Olympic blues, and it's extremely common for athletes to put so much work and effort into their Olympic campaign, and then when the Olympics is over, it's just like, wow, is that it? And then they usually go into some mild depression as they try to then recalibrate to work out, okay, what's my next goal? And usually it's, well, I want to get ready for the next Olympics. But compound that in with COVID. Jake qualified for the Olympics in February of 2020. We didn't have any racing in 2020, had to stay healthy, had to stay on top of things. And then all of a sudden the Olympics rolled around, which was a COVID Olympics. It wasn't a true Olympics, not that what I've been used to, and I've gone to 3. And it was extremely difficult. So when we come back, we looked at the mental and the psychological. Trust me, I had an athlete that committed suicide in 2018. So mental health, psychological help, and emotional help are extremely pivotal and critical in what we look for. And Jake finally took a break and come back, and things didn't click. And then we then looked at other things he was doing outside of it. Was he getting adequate rest? We got blood tests, and it showed the normal of what most athletes will have, just low blood. And then it was Dr. Kabalis that recommended speaking to nutritionist Matty Allen. And it was such a light bulb moment when Jake called me straight of coming out of that meeting and saying that she believes I have red S. And even though it's not really well known, particularly in male athletes, there's a lot that's being poured into this problem over the last 18 months to 2 years, and all the things that we'd been dealing with really then identified that it was possibly this. And so what are the things that Maddie has told you to do in order to overcome red S?
Eat more. So eat more frequently, and especially up the number of carbs. It's like, it seems like the solution is relatively simple if you can stick to it. And for me, it's like when somebody told me the thing you're doing that you think is good for your training is actually hurting your training. I mean, the whole reason I did it in the first place was that I thought I was going to help running. And so now she tells me that, like, eating a bowl of cereal before I go to sleep and, like, eating 6 times a day is going to help me get better. So that's what I've been doing.
And not feeling guilty about it.
I don't think I ever really... No, yeah, you're right. Yeah, not feeling guilty about it. Yeah.
And then she also said that with red S, there is no definitive timeline of how people can be like, all right, you've had this for X amount of time, you'll be fine in a month. Like she said, the trickle down on this could be a month, it could be 3 months, it could be up to 6 months. Is that the case of what she had said to you? Like there's no timeline, but if everything's put into place, these are the things that you'll start to see positives with?
Yeah, approximately. Yeah, you adjust it. And then I think in an ideal world, I probably would have taken downtime when we found that out. But we were a month out from Boston, and I don't know. I don't like. I was close enough that I still wanted to give it a shot. I thought maybe we could pull some things around in time for the race if I like immediately changed my habits, and it kind of felt like things were starting to turn around.
Or maybe we convinced ourselves.
We may have convinced ourselves. I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, in the same way that, like, in the same way I had the behavior in the race of, like, started the race with kind of high hopes and then pretty soon realized, like, no, this is not going to go well. But at the same time, like, never run Boston before. I wanted to run Boston. I felt the same way a month out. Like, you know, I've had injuries before that took me out for, like, years at a time. And I've kind of, it gave me the perspective of not taking anything granted, not to take anything for granted in this sport. And so you get an opportunity to run Boston, take the opportunity, even if it doesn't go well, at the very least you get to see Boylston Street. So, and that was kind of what I was thinking at 10K when I knew my race was over. I was like, well, you're going to be jogging it in, or in my case, walking it in at the very end, but at least you get to see Boylston. So I got that experience. But the plan now is to go back and actually do it right.
What advice would you have for any athlete? I mean, I was going to say a young athlete, but for any athlete that is potentially in the same was in the same predicament as you and is just looking for that small sort of marginal gains and is looking at, modifying their diet, what advice would you be giving them now, having gone through what you've gone through with this?
Well, I think the obvious advice is not like compete at, if you are just eat as much as you need to eat, and don't worry about the weight number. That's only one metric and it's only a small part of a bigger whole. But I think that kind of falls on deaf ears at this point. I think I knew that before I started doing this, and I think most people intellectually know that, and people still end up in the same place. So I guess my advice would be, at the very least, run it by someone who knows what they're talking about. I think had I talked to a nutritionist about I would like to find my race weight and try to hit that, one, they probably would have talked me out of doing it, period. But two, at the very least would have told me how to do it in a smart way so that I didn't dip over this edge. So, I don't know that I can convince every young runner out there not to skip dessert, but I think I can convince runners out there to get a coach, talk to someone who's an expert in the field and knows nutrition and can tell you how to fuel your body properly. Because that's the thing, I wasn't fueling my body properly.
And you're doing it now over a longer period of time, so it's not just there's the 3 main meals that you have. Those meals are breaking down so that you're getting adequate caloric intake over that whole day.
Yeah,
right?
Well, that was the other problem with the way I'm naturally a little bit of a lazy person outside of running. So it would be I'd get up, I'd have my toast before I run, I'd come back, have a big breakfast, and then I get distracted or whatever during the day, and I don't eat anything else until dinner. And especially if I'm a little bit busy that day, I don't feel hungry. But when you're doing 115 miles a week, you need to be giving your body something to kind of burn in that interim. And so you need to be constantly putting in fuel so that your body can be recovering, which is that's what getting better is recovering and sort of repairing damage. And if your body doesn't have the fuel to do that, it can't. So yes, more frequently, space out the caloric intake, and carbs. lots and lots of carbs. The numbers that Maddie was giving me is you have to try. You have to go out of your way to get enough carbs. I thought I ate a lot. Bread is one of the main staples of my diet, and I still was not getting enough.
And it's not like there haven't been big marathon runners. I mean, there's Gelato Bourdin, Rob Di Castella. There have been guys that have run 2.7, 2.8 that have been what some people would deem on the heavier side. Not everyone has to be 120 pounds like a 5'6" Kenyan athlete.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the other reasons took us so long to spot it was even at my lightest, I think you noticed that I was thinner.
Yeah.
But most other people thought I looked, I was still 15 pounds heavier than most other people. But
And I could see that he was gaunt in the face. He had lost some muscle mass, but you had a 6-pack, which he was proud of. There were, from a coaching perspective, there were signs, and I kept getting reassurance that things were okay. And for coaches that are out there, it's okay to ask the question, and it's okay to ask challenging questions, because I think at the end of the day that coaching is a relationship that's built up on trust and honesty, and we were 98% great with our trust and honesty, and the 2% was the dietary part that required a conversation, and a conversation that would have probably been more along the lines of, let's speak to someone who is very excelled in that chosen field of nutrition. And we've learned a lot on that. And as I said to Jake, if one thing can come from what we're trying to do today is that this is common practice of athletes unfortunately having nutrition issues and dietary issues, and to realize that there are ways to get this sorted out without impacting your body, which not only physically you'll see a breakdown, which then can lead to injuries, but there's also a mental and a psychological and emotional breakdown, which, as Maddie has said, there's no definitive way of getting out of this. It could be a month, 3 months, 6 months, it could be as long as 12 months. So, what you may think is helping you may actually be doing damage, and it won't be then identifying it. It'll be how well you actually get out of the well that will be determined as to how well you get over it. But Jake alluded to a month out from Boston, he had a slight breakdown on a run, and it happened to be on a Monday. We normally do our long runs on a Sunday, but I had to shift things around with some of the snow that we had, and Jake was only 30 minutes into a long run, and he was crying, he was angry, he was agitated, and he was in a lot of pain. And he was having hamstring issues, he'd had some hip issues, he was having peroneal issues, and unfortunately he was starting to develop some Achilles issues, very light on the left side, which is what he'd had operated on in 2018.
The right operated in 2018.
The right was operated in 2018, but was unfortunately having more pain on the other side that hadn't been operated on. So give us a little bit of back end to that on when this started to happen, and then where we are now.
Coming off of the trials, took my downtime, and then when I came back, I started feeling in my, just like a little bit of soreness, tightness in my peroneals. So it's the muscles on the outside of your calf. And then it moved up into my hamstring for a little bit, and then would go back down into the peroneals. And initially, because it was kind of a new injury, I thought it was just sort of getting back into the swing of things, aches and pains, and then it just wouldn't go away. So I think at the end of 2020, I started working with Dr. Cabalius about it, like September, maybe August or something like that. Started actually seeing someone because it wasn't going away, and so we just started digging into all the little issues. And it seems like with my body, as soon as you turn over one rock, there's like 10 other rocks underneath it that need to be turned over, because like I found out that I have a partial tear in my hip or my labrum. So that, okay, well maybe that's the issue. And then we looked further down the chain after we tried to address that a little bit, like express the capsule and everything. Well, it turns out that my feet aren't particularly mobile. They're all locked up, and I don't have proper dorsiflexion and plantar flexion and all this other kind of stuff. So let's mobilize the feet for a little bit, and then that didn't fix it. And so let's get some injections in there, and that didn't fix it. So we kept going around and around and around. I did okay going in the Olympics, but it still hurt. And then, it just kept getting worse through the Boston buildup, and that's actually one of the other symptoms of Red S, is lingering injuries that just will not go away. So it probably contributed to my inability to get over some of this tendon stuff. So we knew it was an issue going into Boston. Coming out of Boston, one of my main goals was fix the Red S, and then also I'm going to do what we need to do to get the peroneals healthy. So I went and saw Cabalius, got some imaging done, and I'd always known that I had the Haglund's on the left side. Haglund's deformity, it's a bone spur that develops when you have chronic tendinopathy. The bone just starts to grow up, and then it grows into the tendon and starts rubbing it as you walk. So I had it on both sides. I had the right side operated on in 2018. I knew I had it on the left, but it wasn't symptomatic at the time, so we didn't get the surgery, because I also didn't have great insurance. And so knew the Haglund's was coming back, so we said, okay, we're probably going to have to get the left operated on. Great, it'll be even. So then I went and consulted with the surgeon that was going to do the operation, Dr. Osell, and then as he was looking at the left, he's like, that right doesn't look very good either. Right, it started to hurt a little bit towards the end of Boston training, but I was like, well, we already had that one fixed. That's in the past. That was just regular aches and pains. We said, well, just to be safe, let's get an x-ray done. And so we get the x-ray done, and it turns out the Haglund's is coming back on the right. So now we're going to do the twofer. We're going to get both of them operated on. We got to get, there we go. Yep, so got the left operated on a week ago. So they went in. I also have a Wedgman's or Wegland's, some sort of lesion in the front of the ankle, so that got taken care of too. They took out the bursa, they got rid of some of the tendon tissue, and then they got a little bit more aggressive with the heel. They really cut off quite a bit of it, as opposed to just kind of going in and dremeling it, which is what they did last time. And gonna get the right done in 3 weeks. So hopefully at the end of this, there'll be no more ankle issues going forward.
Yep, so we're having left Achilles and right Achilles operated on, and the Haglund's cut down and shaved down. And then with the peroneal issues that you've had in and around the ankle joint, what are you getting done with that?
the thinking right now is that the peroneals were acting up because they were compensating for the Haglunds and the Achilles. So my body was like, well, there's all this bone digging into the Achilles, so we need to take some stress off of it, so we're going to have the peroneals work a little bit harder. So the consensus seems to be that the peroneal issue should clear up once the Haglunds is taken care of. So we'll see. But yeah, there's no, like, the MRI didn't show any soft tissue issues with the peroneals. Like, it's a cord, like it's a steel band in there, or it was, but there was no actual damage to the tendons or the muscle, whereas there was significant inflammation and bone growth and all kinds of crap going on in the Achilles. So they couldn't find anything in the peroneals, where they didn't do anything with the peroneals. Though the front of the ankle is restricted, and they did go in and get that taken care of.
Okay. So red S, double Achilles surgery, and we're still smiling.
Got 2 years to fix it.
Got 2 years to fix it. We should be thanking your sponsor for being extremely supportive during what has been a really challenging and tough time. And they say it takes a village, and when you look at Dr. Cabalas and Matt Ferguson and even your lovely fiance, your new surgeon, so like there's Matty Alm, like there's a lot of people that have got us to this point. And again, as a coach, I did speak to Jake after that meltdown that we had out at Eagle Trail. We started at Tom Watson Park and we got to Eagle Trail, and I called a good friend of mine, Jim Estes, and said, I do not know what to do here. And I said, I need to talk him out of running Boston. And I did drive around here with a couple of beers, and I was just like, I don't think you should run. And over the 30 or 45 minutes that we chatted, Jake was still determined that he wanted to run and believed that he could still get the best out of himself. And obviously that didn't happen, but I supported him 100%. He was determined and confident that was going to be he was going to turn it around. And our job as a coach is to be there as that supporting person. And we've come out of it with just really a tough year of everything that's happened. And people are always asking me what's going on with Jake, and we haven't really disclosed too much, and it was up to Jake to personally talk about his red S. It was not up to me to talk about it. It's something that's personal, and he took the time to be able to do that. But any athletes that are out there that are struggling mentally and emotionally and physically and are injured, this is a prime example of facing adversity, putting a plan in place. Jake's one of the most dedicated and committed athletes that I've ever met. He knew what the plan's going to be now to get out of it. He knows exactly what he's going to do every day as part of his build-up with his strength and rehab. And we've been through this before. We went through this in 2018, and we ended up getting the ultimate of making the Olympic Games in 2020, which then ended up being 2021. But I believe that, with him being the athlete that he is and the team that we have, that 2024 is still a possibility. And if it wasn't, I know Jake wouldn't be going through all of this. Jake could be retiring and he'd be content with having gone to one Olympics, but he's going to sacrifice and commit everything that he's got in order to make sure that he is a chance of making the Olympics in 2024, right?
Last time I competed with 2 good Achilles, I made the Olympics, so let's do it again.
And then you're getting married in November.
Mm-hmm.
Excited?
Yeah, it's gonna be good. Yep, we got the venue picked out. It's gonna be Washington in November. There's no better place.
Cody, she's been a rock, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I see you in front, but I don't see behind the scenes. And she obviously would have dealt with a lot. You would have been more open and vulnerable in front of her than me and the team, right?
She's had to put up with a decent amount. I try to take it in waves, like just ask for time, like a month before a marathon. But yeah, especially with all the crap I was dealing with, I think put a little bit of a strain there. But she's incredibly supportive, and it's nice. That's why I love her, and that's why I'm marrying her.
I guess the last thing I'll ask, in the last month and maybe 18 months. And we've talked about all the mistakes and the things that should have been done that weren't done and how we're going to correct them now. There's one thing that you could have changed in the last 18 months. What would it have been?
God, how long ago? 18 months.
Prior to the Olympics.
Well, obviously I would have changed my fueling. I would have eaten different. Yeah, I think that's about it. But, like, I don't regret running Boston, even knowing how shitty that run went. Crappy that run. No, it's too late now.
Thank you, Mary Kate, for letting us run.
Yes,
we want to be back there next year. So
yeah, even knowing how bad it turned out, I wouldn't change it. I've never dropped out of a race, and in spite of how bad it felt, there were still magical moments on in Framingham and everything in Wellesley. So yeah, I am annoyed at myself for having fallen into this trap when I knew it was there, and I thought that I could kind of like tiptoe my way around it, and I ended up falling in it anyway, and that's frustrating. One of my first indications that it was a bad idea was that I didn't talk to you about it because I knew you'd say no. But I love running and I love doing what I get to do, and I get the opportunity to do, and so yeah. Even so, it still wouldn't change a whole lot.
Well, I wish we were on here talking about amazing things and how great life is, but sometimes life can suck. And I've been there myself as an athlete with injuries, and it can be some of the darkest and most challenging times, and you got to lean on those that are closest to you to get you out of it. And I look at some of the times that I struggled with, but I still had a pretty good career. Was able to finish high up in some majors and ran 2:09 and went to 3 Olympic Games. And I think my value as a coach is instilling a logical idea, like putting that older head on younger shoulders, but more importantly also understanding that sometimes Jake is making the same decisions that I made as an athlete, and sometimes unfortunately we're too brash, we're a little green behind the ears, and we do things without properly talking it through. And the biggest thing is having trust and being able to communicate with those that are closest with you, particularly a coach. So young athletes, if you don't feel like that you have that trust element and you don't think you can communicate with your coach, then you need to really sit down and take a look at the coaching dynamics and the relationship and what's important, because you're going to face a lot of challenging times. And when you're facing that baptism of fire, you want to make sure that there's not anyone behind you, everyone's standing beside you to take on what's coming. So I want to thank Jake for being honest. I'm a little emotional because this is, honestly, it sucks. It's been a really hard 12, 18 months. And, we're just hoping that this just gives a little bit of insight that, we don't have to be on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter every day talking about how life great is, because as I said, sometimes it's not. But I also think it's important to be honest and truthful, to let everyone know that it's okay for life to suck sometimes and things not to go your way. But it's how you build up that structure and the people around you to know that as much as you're having a tough day today, you're one step closer to getting out of that situation tomorrow with the people you're around. So to everyone that's struggling at the minute, best of luck. Find a friend, find a companion, find someone that you can confide in, and start to build that fortress back up again. So you got any sound advice for them?
It's not going to be as inspirational as that, but no. Yeah, I mean, I think as runners we get kind of tunnel vision, and we get the perspective of, like, if it's not hurting, it's not working. And I think those are both some of the things that contribute to our success, but they're also some of our biggest liabilities. And so yeah, I just find some people that you trust, that you can bounce ideas off of and have open communication. And I think it's really important to have another pair of eyes. Like, you can know everything in the world, but then when it comes to yourself, for some reason, like, you can just get blind to so many warning signs. And so having somebody that cares about you, that is willing to put in the time to help you achieve those goals, and just get another perspective on it. So
because as athletes, you're going to analyze, overanalyze, and psychoanalyze, but then you've got to speak to someone with the voice of reason, right?
I mean, I always, like, given the choice, I always err on the side of one more rep, because, at the very least, I won't feel like I let myself, I'd rather do too much than too little, and it's kind of always the perspective, and that is very often not what's required. but it's hard for me to talk myself out of it. So it's good to have somebody else, and whether that's a coach or a doctor or a nutritionist or whatever it is,
just someone.
It is key, and I think talk to any pro, retired or current, and I think they'll tell you pretty much the same thing.
And for those that want to read the Red S post that Jake put on his Instagram story, what's your handle?
At Jake Bill Riley.
At Jake Bill Riley. So
and I don't post very often, so it's pretty close to the top of the feed.
It will be, yep. So it's at JakeBillRiley. Well, thanks everyone. As I said, hopefully someone will get something out of this and be able to draw a little bit of motivation and inspiration. Who knows, they may even draw some common sense. At the end of the day, whatever you get out of it that's a positive, that's what we're here for. And hopefully next time we check in, we'll be halfway through Jake's rehabilitation and process, and we'll give an update. And then from there, hopefully we're back into the thick of things at the end of the year. So thanks for tuning in.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants to reach out, please, by all means, you can direct message Jake on his Instagram, or you can reach out to me. You can just email me, Lee, Lee, at teamboco, teamboco.com, and we're here to help. So until next time, stay safe and keep doing what you do.